Negotiations have collapsed, humanity leaves, and the galaxy begins to fear part. The air inside the grand chamber of Zyra 7 hung heavy with tension. Delegates from 23 starfaring species sat in their assigned arcs, each behind smooth consoles that glowed with soft blue light. The room was shaped like a half-sphere, open to the stars above through a transparent dome. Outside, the slow dance of distant suns and nebulae painted the void in quiet colors. But inside, silence ruled. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes just before something breaks. At the center of it all stood Daniel Cruz. He was not tall, not loud, not flashy. His uniform was simple. Dark navy with silver trim, no medals, no rank pins, just the small earth insignia over his heart. His hands were clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the High Envoy of the Cathari Alliance, who had just finished speaking. The envoy's voice had been calm, measured, final. "The Galactic Concord cannot accept humanity's terms," he had said. "Your refusal to comply with AI governance protocols and your continued expansion beyond agreed borders leave us no choice. The talks are over." Daniel did not move. He had expected this. Maybe not today, maybe not so soon, but he had known it would come. For 6 long cycles, nearly 2 Earth years, humanity had sat at this table trying to explain, to reason, to find common ground. They had offered trade, shared research, even joint patrols along the outer rim. But the Conquered wanted control. Total control. They wanted humanity to shut down its unrestricted artificial intelligence projects, to hand over its frontier colonies, to submit to oversight like every other species had done centuries ago. But Earth was different, not because it thought it was better, but because it remembered what happened when one group held all the power. History was full of lessons like that, and humanity had learned them the hard way. Around the chamber, the other delegates avoided Daniel's gaze. Some looked down at their consoles. Others whispered to their aides. None spoke up. The Concord worked by consensus, and consensus had been reached. Humanity was out. Daniel took a slow breath, then he reached for the small comm unit on his wrist. He pressed a single button. "Fleet Command," he said, his voice low but clear. "Initiate withdrawal protocol. All human assets depart Zyra 7 within the hour." The words hung in the air like a stone dropped in still water. A ripple went through the room. The Cathari envoy blinked, his long silver eyelids fluttering in surprise. "You would leave so easily?" he asked, his tone laced with disbelief. "We never wanted to stay under your rules," Daniel replied. "We only wanted to stand as equals. Since that's not possible, we choose to walk away." He turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. His boots clicked softly against the polished floor. Behind him, murmurs grew into full conversations. Some species looked worried. Others seemed relieved. None understood what they had just set in motion. Outside the summit hall, the human delegation was already moving. Diplomats, scientists, security officers, they all knew the signal. They had trained for this. Not for war, not for protest, but for departure. Clean, fast, total. No loose ends. Daniel met Lisa Morgan near the docking bay. She was leaning against a bulkhead, arms crossed, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She didn't look surprised. "They really did it," she said. "They did," Daniel answered. "Now we do what we promised we would." "No looking back," she said, more to herself than to him. "No looking back," he agreed. Lisa was one of Earth's top engineers. She had spent the last 3 years on Zyra 7, helping design joint infrastructure projects that would never happen now. But she had also been preparing, quietly, carefully. Every human-built system on the station, from life support to comms, had a hidden failsafe. Not a weapon, not a trap, just a way to shut it down cleanly if they ever had to leave in a hurry. It was part of Exodus protocol. As they walked toward the human transport ship, the Aurora, alarms began to sound. Not loud or panicked, but steady, calm. The station's AI announced in a neutral tone that non-conquered personnel are requested to vacate all shared sectors. It was a polite way of saying, "You're no longer welcome." On the bridge of the Aurora, Captain Elena Rodriguez was already running final checks. She gave Daniel a quick nod as he stepped aboard. "All personnel accounted for," she said. "Helios ring reports ready for remote shutdown. Fleet Command confirms all colonies have received the signal." Daniel sat in the command chair beside her. "Then let's go home," he said. But there was no going home, not really. Earth was still there, yes, but the real home now was wherever humanity chose to build next. And that place was far from here. As the Aurora detached from 07 and fired its thrusters, Daniel watched the station shrink in the viewport. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful, glowing against the black. But he knew better. Peace built on control was not peace at all. It was just quiet obedience. Back on the Cathari homeworld, news of humanity's departure spread quickly. Most saw it as a victory. The upstart species had been put in its place. But not everyone celebrated. Counselor Vrel, an old strategist with deep lines on his face and deeper doubts in his mind, stared at the report for a long time. They didn't argue, he muttered to his aide. They didn't threaten, they just left. Is that not what we wanted? The aide asked. Maybe, Vrel said, but I've studied them. Humans don't run unless they have somewhere to go, and they don't leave unless they're done talking. He turned off the screen and walked to the window of his tower. Far below, the city pulsed with light and order. Everything in its place, everything controlled. For the first time in decades, Vrel felt uneasy. Meanwhile, across dozens of systems, human colonies sprang into motion. Freighters loaded with families lifted off from New Oregon. Miners sealed the tunnels on Ceres Drift and boarded waiting shuttles. Scientists wiped servers clean on research outposts near the Orion Veil. No data was left behind. No weapons. No messages of anger. Just empty stations and silent comms. Admiral Carter Green watched from the bridge of the WEF Liberty, the lead ship of the defense fleet. His orders were clear. Protect the evacuation, avoid engagement, preserve every life. He didn't need to be told twice. He had fought in the Vorn border wars. He knew what humanity was capable of when cornered. But this wasn't about fighting. This was about choosing a different path. All ships report ready, his first officer said. Then set course for the Veil Nebula, Carter replied. Maximum stealth. No emissions. And tell every captain no heroics. We leave clean. As the last human ship vanished into fold space, Zyra 7 fell quiet again. The Concorde resumed its business as if nothing had happened. But something had. A door had closed. And on the other side, humanity was already building something new. No one in the galaxy realized it yet, but the silence that followed would be louder than any war. Negotiations have collapsed, humanity leaves, and the galaxy begins to fear part. To the signal reached every human outpost at the same moment. It was not a voice, not a message with words, just a single pulse. A coded rhythm known only to Earth's networks. Across the spiral arm, lights flickered on in control rooms. Alarms chimed softly and people stopped what they were doing. They knew what it meant. Exodus had begun. On Ceres Drift, a mining station buried deep in the ice fields of the outer belt, Lisa Morgan stood at the main console of Helios Ring. Her fingers flew over the keys, pulling up system maps, checking fuel levels, confirming evac routes. Around her, engineers moved quickly but calmly. No one shouted. No one panicked. They had trained for this. Not because they expected to lose, but because they respected what could go wrong. All civilian shuttles are away, said a young technician named Jake. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled slightly. Last transport just cleared the docking arm. Good, Lisa said. Now initiate the scuttle sequence. Level 3 containment. No debris larger than 5 meters. Jake nodded and entered the final commands. Deep inside the station's core, shaped charges armed themselves. In 10 minutes, Helios Ring would collapse inward, its metal bones folding into a harmless cloud of dust. Nothing useful would be left for the Concorde to study. Nothing to reverse engineer. Humanity was leaving clean. Lisa took one last look at the viewport. Beyond the thick glass, the stars were sharp and cold. She thought of her sister, who had died in the Titan flare incident 10 years ago. A solar storm that wiped out 3 colonies because the Concorde refused to share early warning tech. Not this time, she whispered. Then she turned and walked toward the waiting shuttle. Farther out, near the edge of known space, New Oregon was emptying fast. The colony had been built on a world with wide green plains and twin moons. Families had lived there for 2 generations. Now they packed what they could carry, photos, tools, seeds, and boarded the evacuation ships. Children held stuffed animals. Elders carried data slates with family trees. No one looked back as the transports lifted off in perfect formation. On the bridge of the lead ship, Captain Elena Rodriguez watched the planet shrink below. Her heart ached, but her voice stayed firm. All transports accounted for. Set course for Rendezvous Alpha. Engage silent running. Meanwhile, the United Earth Defense Fleet gathered in the shadow of a dead star. Admiral Carter Green stood on the command deck of the WEF Liberty. arms crossed, eyes fixed on the star map. Red dots showed the positions of every human ship, over 300 vessels from tiny scouts to massive arcs filled with civilians. Blue dots, far fewer, marked the conquered patrols. They were still confused, still slow to react. "They think we're scattering," Carter said to his first officer, a woman named Maria Lopez. "Let them think that." "Do you really believe they won't follow?" she asked. "They might," he said, "but they won't find us. We're not running to hide. We're running to build," he gave the order. The fleet split into 5 groups, each taking a different path through folded space. None of the routes led to Earth. Earth was a symbol now, not a destination. The real future lay beyond the Veil Nebula, a region of space most species avoided because of its unstable gravity and strange energy readings. But humanity had studied it for years. They knew its secrets, and they knew how to use them. Back on Zira 7, the Concorde finally realized what was happening. Reports poured in from every sector. Human stations were going dark. Colonies were empty. Trade lanes were silent. At first they assumed sabotage or retreat. Then came the truth. Humanity had left everything behind on purpose. No traps, no bombs, just absence. The Cathari envoy called an emergency session. "They vanished," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "Not a single ship has been seen near conquered borders. It's as if they never existed." Councillor Vrel sat quietly in the back. He did not speak. He only watched. He remembered the human ambassador's calm face, the lack of anger, the certainty in his step. This was not panic. This was planned weeks past. The Concorde sent scouts to former human sites. They found clean rooms, powered-down reactors, empty streets. On New Oregon, a single message was left carved into a stone near the Old Town Square. "We chose to leave. Remember why? No signature, no threat. Just words." On Ceres Drift, the scouts found nothing but ice and silence. Helios Ring was gone, no wreckage, no signals. It was as if the station had never been built. One young Cathari analyst whispered that it felt like humanity had erased itself from the galaxy. But they hadn't. They were just out of sight. Deep in the Veil Nebula, hidden behind layers of ion storms and gravitational lenses, the first human ark arrived. Its name was Horizon. Inside, thousands of people woke from cryosleep. Engineers powered up reactors. Farmers unpacked seed vaults. Builders unfolded habitat modules like giant flowers blooming in the dark. Lisa Morgan stepped onto the command deck of Horizon and looked at the star map. Around her, the crew worked in quiet focus. No one celebrated. No one cheered. They knew the hard part was just beginning. "All systems green," Jake reported. "We're stable in orbit around Kepler 22b. "Good," Lisa said. "Begin phase 1. Atmospheric processors first, then water extraction, then the ring. The ring. That was the real project. Not a weapon, not a fortress. A structure so vast it would wrap around a small black hole, using its gravity to power a new kind of civilization. It would take years, maybe decades, but they had time, and they had freedom. Admiral Carter Green arrived a week later with the last of the fleet. He met Lisa on the observation deck. Outside, the nebula swirled in soft purples and blues. "They'll come looking," he said. "Let them," she replied. "By the time they find us, we won't need to hide anymore." On Earth, the final evacuation ships lifted off. The last president stood on the empty lawn of the White House watching the sky. Then she boarded the final shuttle and sealed the hatch. Behind her, the planet slept, quiet, waiting, but no longer home. The galaxy thought humanity had given up. But in truth, humanity had just begun, and no one, not even the Concorde, understood what that really meant. Negotiations have collapsed, humanity leaves, and the galaxy begins to fear part. 3 months passed, and the galaxy settled into a strange new quiet. Trade routes once shared with human freighters now ran empty. Data hubs that used to buzz with human research updates fell silent. Even neutral ports like Nixhaven felt the change. Fewer voices in the common halls, fewer strange foods in the markets, fewer arguments about philosophy in the late-night cafes. Humanity had been loud, curious, and sometimes messy, but its absence left a hollow space that no one knew how to fill. The Galactic Concorde told itself it was better this way. The Cathari envoy gave speeches about unity and order restored. The Veil Syndicate reopened old mining contracts without human oversight. Life went on. But beneath the surface, unease grew. It started small. A patrol ship reported odd sensor echoes near the Veil Nebula. Nothing solid, just ripples in space that vanished when approached. Another scout claimed to have picked up a faint energy signature, rhythmic and steady, like a heartbeat from deep inside the nebula. Command dismissed it as interference. Still, the reports kept coming, not from one place but many, always on the edges, always just out of reach. On the Cathari homeworld, Counselor Vrel spent his days in the archives. He pulled up old files, battle logs from the Vorn border conflicts, recovery reports after the Titan flare, engineering assessments of human-built stations. What he found surprised him. Humanity had never won through brute force. They won by adapting, by rebuilding faster, by turning loss into fuel. After the Titan flare wiped out 3 colonies, they didn't beg for help. They built better shields in 6 months. When the Vorn raiders attacked their freight lines, they didn't ask the Concord for protection. They designed silent running ships and rerouted everything in weeks. They don't break, Vrel muttered to himself one evening, staring at a grainy image of the UF Liberty during a skirmish. They bend, and then they come back stronger. His aide, a young analyst named Tail, entered with a new report. Another anomaly, he said, handing over a data slate. This time near the dead zone of Xylos. Same pattern, low-frequency pulses, no visual contact. Vrel took the slate but didn't look at it right away. How many is that now? 17 in the last 3 months, Tail said. All in regions humans used to operate in, all after their disappearance. They're not hiding, Vrel said slowly. They're working. But when he brought his concerns to the High Council, they laughed. You fear ghosts, said Envoy Kor, his voice dripping with scorn. Humanity is gone. They lacked the wisdom to join us. Now they rot in the void if they survive at all. Vrel said nothing. He knew better than to argue. But that night, he sent a private message to an old contact in the Neutral Observatory network. Watch the veil, he wrote, and tell me if anything moves. Meanwhile, deep inside the nebula, humanity was far from rotting. The arc horizon had become the heart of a new society. Farms grew under artificial suns. Schools opened in repurposed cargo bays. Children played in zero-G parks while engineers worked below, welding the first segments of the ring. It was not a weapon, as some feared it might be. It was a power source, a home, and a promise, all in one. Lisa Morgan stood on the outer gantry, suited up, watching as a new module locked into place. The black hole at the center of their system, small, stable, and perfectly tamed, pulled gently on the structure, feeding it energy through magnetic tethers. It hummed, not with noise, but with potential. Every bolt, every wire, every calculation had been human-made. No Concord oversight, no restrictions, just pure, unfiltered progress. On the UF Liberty, Admiral Carter Green reviewed patrol logs. His fleet now served as guardians, not warriors. They watched the edges of their new territory, not to attack, but to warn. So far, no conquered ships had come close, but Carter knew it was only a matter of time. They'll find us, Maria Lopez said, standing beside him on the bridge. Maybe, Carter replied, but by then we won't be the same people they turned away. Back on Earth, the planet sat empty. Satellites still orbited, powered by solar panels, sending automated weather reports to no one. Cities stood silent, plants growing through cracked sidewalks. In Geneva, the old UN building held dust and echoes, but even there something stirred. Deep in a sealed vault beneath the ruins of Geneva, a single server blinked to life. It had been left behind on purpose, not as a trap but as a message. It broadcast one thing on a loop, on a frequency only the Concord would eventually check. We chose to leave. You should remember why. Months turned into 2 years. The Concord's confidence began to crack. Trade slowed. Species that once relied on human-made parts struggled to replace them. Medical advances stalled without human bioresearch. Even the Cathari found their own AI systems lagging. Human algorithms had been quietly woven into half the galaxy's networks, and now they were gone. Envoy Kor called another summit. We must address the human void, he declared. It is causing instability. Burrell stood. Instability or consequence? He asked. The room fell silent. We pushed them out because we feared what they might become. Now we suffer because we never asked what they could have given us. No one answered. That same week, a lone freighter appeared at Nix Haven. It bore no flags, no transponder code, no name. It simply docked at an empty bay and powered down. Port security approached cautiously. Inside, they found no crew, only crates. And inside the crates, data crystals. When decoded, the crystals held schematics. Fusion reactors that ran on seawater, air purifiers that worked on toxic worlds, nanits that could heal bone fractures in hours, all open source, all free, all labeled with one line, "From humanity. Use wisely." Lisa Morgan's name appeared in the metadata. She was listed as Chief Architect Project Horizon. The transmission origin was traced to the Veil Nebula, but by the time scouts arrived, the signal was gone. Only silence remained, yet the gift spread. Neutral worlds began building the reactors. Frontier clinics used the nanites. Even some Concord members in secret tested the designs. They worked perfectly, too perfectly. There were no backdoors, no hidden costs, just clean, generous knowledge. For the first time, the galaxy asked not, where did they go, but why did they leave us this? And in the quiet of their empty halls, the answer began to form. Humanity hadn't fled in shame. They had walked away in strength, and they were watching. Negotiations have collapsed, humanity leaves, and the galaxy begins to fear. Part 4. The data crystals changed everything. At first, the Concord tried to ignore them. Envoy Corps called them a trick and ordered all copies destroyed. But the schematics had already spread. Neutral traders copied them. Frontier medics used them. Even Cathari engineers working in secret labs tested the fusion designs and found them flawless. The reactors ran cleaner, safer, and longer than anything the Concord had built in centuries. There was no malware, no tracking code, no demand for repayment, just knowledge given freely. People began to whisper, not about fear, but about shame. Why had they pushed humanity away? What kind of species gives away its greatest discoveries and asks for nothing in return? The answer unsettled them more than any weapon ever could. On the Cathari homeworld, Councillor Varel watched the shift unfold. Petitions poured in from lower councils, asking for a review of the Exodus decision. Scientists demanded access to the full dataset. Even military leaders admitted their systems were falling behind. Varel said little, but he knew the truth. Humanity wasn't trying to win back favor. They were showing the galaxy what it had lost by choosing control over trust. Meanwhile, deep in the Veil Nebula, life moved forward. The ring around the black hole grew larger every day. Its curve now stretched over 200 kilometers, a silver arc glowing faintly with captured energy. Inside its hollow spine, entire neighborhoods were being built. Homes with real windows, schools with gardens, labs where children learned quantum physics before they learned to drive. It was not a colony. It was a civilization reborn. Lisa Morgan walked through one of the new districts, her boots clicking on the metal walkway. She passed a group of kids playing with floating light orbs, their laughter echoing in the low gravity. Further on, farmers tended hydroponic wheat under soft blue lamps. Everything here was made from recycled parts, repurposed chips, or grown from seeds brought from Earth. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was taken for granted. She stopped at an observation deck and looked out at the ring's curve. Jake joined her, holding a datapad. "Phase 4 is complete," he said. "The gravity lens is stable. We can start testing the long-range comms array next week." "Good," Lisa said. "We'll need it soon." "You think they'll come?" he asked. "Not yet," she replied. "But they'll keep looking. And when they do, we won't be hiding." On the UF Liberty, Admiral Carter Green received a report from a scout ship near the outer rim. A Concord patrol had been spotted, not attacking, just watching. They lingered near the edge of the nebula for 3 days before turning back. No weapons were raised, no signals sent. Just observation. "They're curious," Maria Lopez said, "not hostile." "Curiosity is the first step," Carter said. "Fear comes after." He remembered the old days when human ships had to ask permission to enter Concord space, when every invention was reviewed by a committee of aliens who didn't understand it. Now humanity built black hole rings and gave away starship-grade tech like it was nothing. The balance had shifted, and the galaxy was starting to feel it. Back at Nix Haven, the lone freighter that delivered the crystals was still docked. No one claimed it. No one came to retrieve it. Port authorities scanned it daily, but it remained empty, powered down, peaceful. Some began to treat it like a shrine. Traders left small tokens on its hull, coins, carved stones, handwritten notes. One read, "Thank you for not becoming what they feared." The Concord tried to ban such acts. They called it unauthorized reverence. But the people didn't listen. For the first time, a species had left not with anger but with grace, and that was harder to forget than any war. On Earth, the hidden server continued its quiet broadcast. More Concord analysts finally tuned in. They listened to the looped message over and over. We chose to leave. You should remember why. At first, they thought it was a threat. Now some heard it as a warning. Others heard it as a lesson. Vreel requested access to the full archive of human diplomatic records. After weeks of delay, he was granted it. He spent nights reading Daniel Cruz's final speeches, Lisa Morgan's engineering logs, Carter Green's fleet reports. What struck him most was the consistency. Humanity never lied, never bluffed. They said what they meant and meant what they said. They asked for freedom, not dominance. And when denied, they walked away without burning the bridge, just leaving it behind. One evening, Vrel stood on his balcony looking up at the stars. He thought of the ring they were building. Not to destroy, but to create. Not to rule, but to live. We called them reckless, he murmured. But they were just honest. Weeks later, a new signal appeared. Not from the Veil Nebula, but from a dead system near the Orion Spur. It was a simple pulse repeating every 30 seconds. When decoded, it contained coordinates and a single word. Observe. Scouts were sent. What they found stunned them. Orbiting a cold, dead star was a structure unlike anything in galactic records. Not a ship, not a station. A sphere made of interlocking panels slowly rotating, humming with contained energy. Sensors showed it was generating a stable wormhole inside its core. Not for travel, for study, for connection. Attached to the sphere was a plaque written in over 50 languages, including Cathari and Virel. It read, "Built by humanity. Open to all who seek knowledge, not control. No guards, no locks, no conditions." The Concorde held an emergency session. Envoy Corps wanted it destroyed. "It's a lure," he shouted. A trap wrapped in kindness, but this time others spoke up. A viral delegate said, "My people have used their medical nanites. They saved my daughter's life. I will not call that a trap." A Zenthar scientist added, "Their reactor designs cut our pollution by 90%. If this is deception, I welcome it." Vrel stood slowly. "Maybe," he said, "we've been wrong about them all along. Maybe they never wanted to conquer. Maybe they just wanted to build, and hoped we'd join them." Silence filled the chamber. Outside, the galaxy watched and waited. The sphere remained. The ring grew, and humanity, unseen but felt, continued its quiet work. Not hiding, not threatening, just being. And in that stillness, fear began to bloom. Not of what humanity might do, but of what it had already become. Negotiations have collapsed, humanity leaves, and the galaxy begins to fear part. 3 years after the Exodus, the galaxy no longer spoke of humanity as a problem to be managed. It spoke of them in hushed tones with awe and unease. The ring around the black hole was no longer rumor, it was fact. Deep-range telescopes pushed beyond their limits by desperate scientists had captured it, not as a blur but as a clear, deliberate shape. A perfect circle of light and metal, humming with energy that bent space itself. It was not a weapon. It was a city. A power source, a beacon. And it was growing. The Concord had sent 3 scout fleets to find its exact location. None returned with clear data. Their sensors glitched near the Veil Nebula. Their navigation systems drifted. Some ships came back with hours of missing time and no explanation. The crews reported only calm, silence, and a feeling of being watched. Not by eyes, but by something older, wiser, patient. On the Cathari homeworld, Counselor Vrel stood before the High Council one last time. He was older now, his voice quieter but firmer. "We spent centuries building a galaxy of rules," he said. "Humanity spent 3 years building a future. Which one do you think will last?" Envoy Corps, once so sure of his authority, sat in silence. Even he had used a human-designed air filter in his private quarters. His daughter's broken arm had healed in a day thanks to their nanites. He could no longer pretend they were the enemy. They were something else entirely. Meanwhile, inside the ring, now called the Cradle by those who lived there, life thrived. Children born in orbit had never seen Earth, but they knew its stories. They learned about oceans, forests, and cities that once reached for the sky. They also learned about mistakes, wars, pollution, division. And they were taught one rule above all: never trade freedom for false safety. Lisa Morgan stood on the central spire, looking out at the curve of the cradle. Below, gardens bloomed under artificial suns. Schools buzzed with lessons in physics, art, and ethics. Factories built not weapons but tools for healing, for building, for exploring. The black hole at the center spun gently, feeding the ring with clean, endless energy. It was not tamed by force but understood through patience. That, Lisa thought, was the real difference. Jake approached holding a report. "The long-range array is online," he said. "We can reach any system in the known galaxy now." "Good," she said. "Then it's time." She walked to the communications hub where a small team waited. On the main screen, a live feed showed the Concorde's central chamber on Zyra 7. They had not been invited. They had simply opened a channel. And to everyone's surprise, no one shut it off. Daniel Cruz appeared on screen. He looked older, calmer. His eyes holding the weight of years, but not bitterness. "People of the galaxy," he began, his voice steady. "We are not returning. We are not asking to rejoin. We are simply showing you what is possible when you stop fearing what you do not control." Behind him, the cradle filled the viewport. Vast, glowing, alive. "We built this not to impress you, but to prove a point. Progress does not require permission. Trust does not require surrender. And peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the presence of choice." Then the feed shifted. It showed the sphere near the dead star, now visited by dozens of neutral ships. Scientists from 10 species worked side by side, studying the wormhole core, sharing notes, laughing over meals. No flags, no ranks. Just curiosity. "You can keep your Concord," Daniel said. "We keep our freedom, but the door is open. Not for you to rule us, but for you to join us if you're ready to change." The transmission ended. Silence filled the Concorde chamber. Then slowly a single delegate stood. Then another. Then another. Not in anger, but in respect. Back in the cradle, Carter Green watched from the UF Liberty. His fleet no longer patrolled for threats. They escorted research vessels, helped lost ships, shared navigation data. They were not soldiers anymore. They were neighbors. On Earth, the hidden server finally powered down. Its message had been heard. The planet remained empty, but not forgotten. It was a monument now, a reminder of where they came from and why they left. In the years that followed, more species drifted away from the Concord. Not in rebellion, but in quiet choice. They built their own rings, their own spheres, using human schematics as a starting point, not a cage. The galaxy did not collapse. It changed. It grew, and humanity, they kept building. Not to dominate, not to prove a point, but because that was who they were. Creators, explorers, survivors. The Concorde never admitted it was wrong, but it stopped speaking of humanity as a threat. Instead, in schools and councils and quiet conversations, a new phrase spread. What would humanity do? Not with fear, but with hope. And far beyond the Veil Nebula, in a ring of light around a quiet black hole, a new star flickered to life. Not born of gas and dust, but of human hands. Artificial, precise, perfect, a sun they made themselves. The galaxy watched, and for the first time in 1,000 years it wondered not how to control the future, but how to deserve it.